I'm the VP of EMEA for Moloco. Moloco is a company that was founded more than 12 years ago. We just celebrated our anniversary. And we've been in machine learning and AI space ever since. Moloco, actually, the name came from machine learning company, MLC initially. So we feel we have a degree of expertise when it comes to these topics. And I've been in the app ecosystem for almost 15 years now. And what I love about it, about this company, about this ecosystem, about people like yourselves, is that it's constantly changing. There's regulations that keep us on our toes, as you're all familiar with, and there's technologies that are changing. And this is one of these moments where technology is really forcing some change and a rethinking and learning. And I'm excited to go on this path with you today. Well, although everything seems to be changing, I think there's also things that aren't changing, and that's the title of this presentation today. And we're going to focus also on those, on the things that aren't changing and things that you can do in these times. But before we do that, we will actually look at the disruption that AI is bringing with itself. And so we're going to the first participation prize. This is the wake-up call. Who in this room, by a show of hands, has discovered a new brand using an LLM or chatbot? Anyone? Okay. If I ballpark, it seems, first of all, I think you raised your hand first, so happy birthday. Please pass it on. Well done. I love this part. It's the best. So roughly 1/3 of the room actually, which coincides with this data, which we've conducted some research with BCG, Boston Consulting Group in the US. And some of this data is from that research. And what this shows to me is that actually, when you think about the previous experience and how users discover it. So when we think about a consumer journey, we typically talk in 4 phases. We talk about inspiration, discovery, consideration, and then conversion. And when it comes to inspiration and discovery, what this shows is that we're actually experiencing quite a dramatic shift. Previously, searches, blogs, influencers, and traditional advertising were the places where brands were discovered. And now we need to consider all of a sudden this new channel. And because this is all relatively new and happening fast, data shows that not many companies, not many brands are prepared for this. And we heard that only 7% of brands are actually have an AI advanced presence. And what we mean by that is they either have a direct integration with an LLM or they optimize for AI already. Okay, so moving on. And this is potentially even more powerful in terms of showing how big this shift is. Well, this data is showing that 80% of searches do not end in a click if the AI preview is shown. And what that means is that brands have previously had the chance to connect with users on their websites, lose that ability to a large extent. and web traffic is really at risk, right? Okay, so moving down the funnel, when you're thinking about the research phase and trying to understand what products should you actually be buying, show of hands, how many people of you have researched what to buy using an AI tool? Okay, yeah, that's more like it. Now I don't know. Well, hold on. Chocolate. There you go. Well done. You were super fast. This is waking me up as well, a bit of exercise. Thank you. So what we're saying, this is 47%, but I think almost the entire room just raised their hands, and I actually expect this number to be higher in the future. And we have more data later to suggest that it is increasing fast. When it comes to actually making the purchase, this is a number that is almost equally high as the one before, but I'm not sure how you feel about this, but I would have expected this to be lower. 45% of people are saying that they will be comfortable to let AI make the purchase. How many of you would feel comfortable? You? 2, 3? Not many. 4? Okay. There you go. Happy birthday. Yeah, so that number in this room is definitely lower. I personally feel like I would like to have that control still, to make that final decision, pull the trigger, but all the research and so on can, I think, but probably that's also how these people are interpreting this result. Well, what all of this shows is that there are massive shifts in how we reach and connect with consumers, right? But what this isn't saying is that we don't need to, or need to all of a sudden stop reaching or connecting with consumers. So it's less about what needs to be done and the job that needs to be done, but rather how it's going to evolve and how it needs to change. And as these changes are happening really rapidly, what we like to think about at Moloco, we like to focus on the things we can control, the things that we predict are not changing. And this is what I want to talk to you about next, right? So, because there's a lot of ground to cover, I'm going to spoiler this section, and I'm going to tell you that I'm going to talk about re-engagement, seasonal optimization, and channel diversification. Okay? So let's go to probably the less glamorous part of the re-engagement, of the marketing flywheel. I think it's widely understood that it's more efficient to try and retain payers than to go out and find new payers. And I want to show you some numbers that just double down on this statement. Well, when it comes to games, 55% of users will disappear after the first session. And in non-gaming, this isn't much better. After 3 days, 66% of the users are gone. And this attrition continues, and it's quite extreme in my mind, because after 30 days, half of the users, almost half of the users, will have uninstalled your app. So don't they just come back, they actually uninstall your app. And that means that all of your work, you've thought about creatives, you built creative, you planned budgets, you went out there and maybe optimized landing pages or app stores. All of that is wasted for that portion of users, and they don't even enjoy the value of your app, and they're gone. So when we now compare a bit payers to non-payers, what we see is that for non-payers, after 3 days of inactivity, let's focus on inactivity. After 3 days of inactivity, the chances that you will get a non-payer to return is around 20% by themselves. For payers, there's a bit more resilience. And on average, what we see is that 6 days of inactivity still means that only a third of the users will come back without an engagement. And that's a challenge. And challenges are always also opportunities. And this is where re-engagement comes in, and the value that it can drive. And this is made even more, the stakes are even higher, given that the value of users is increasing, and in the last 10 years or more, like since 2014, the revenue that is being driven is doubling. So users are more valuable over time. Now, when we look at the difference between UA and re-engagement campaigns, the cost of driving an action with the re-engagement campaign is 4 times lower than it is with a UA campaign. And the return on investment or return on ad spend, ROAS, is 9 times higher. And an apps flyer actually showed some data that week 12 retention is 85% higher when users have been re-engaged, which is obviously very meaningful. We did further tests, and we wanted to validate this numbers. And what we found is that the cost, the CPA, was 74% lower on re-engagement, and ROAS was 568% higher on average. And if you think about the disruption of the user journey with AI and the increasing value of the users, you really want to make sure that it is smart, and a lot of the playbooks are shifting to incorporate re-engagement in order to protect this investment that is so valuable. Okay, let's look at a case. This is a Vietnamese company. I'm probably not going to pronounce it correctly, but I tried to figure out how to pronounce this name, and I'm going to do my best. So apologies for anyone who speaks Vietnamese. Zang SM is the company. Is how it's. Yeah, yay! Thank. That deserves chocolate. Look at me getting my steps in so early. Okay, so Zang SM is the first all-electric ride-hailing company, and they had big goals. They wanted to grow, become market leaders, and they wanted to focus on the large cities. And what they tried to do is get the first-time riders to become repeat users. And so what we did with first-party data, with payer data, we went and we tried to achieve their goals. And I'll let the results speak for themselves. Okay. In summary, there are when it comes to re-engagement, there are 4 things that the best teams are doing. They are using behavioral data. The data that I showed earlier were averages, right? Behavioral data and signals from within your app are going to be more accurate for you, and it's an inspiration for you to look there, right? Because your drop-off points, your churn, your inactivity windows will be different. So using behavioral data to understand risk of churn is number 1. Number 2, you can't use the same creatives that you use for UA campaign. I think it's obvious, but I just have to say it. You need personalized data that uses the context that you have about the users in order to increase the chances of them returning. Third, being proactive and using times like these, which are seasonal and highly competitive, is important to protect your valuable users so that they don't get so that they don't churn to your competitors, right? And then the last point, obviously measurement. You want to understand, did it work or not? And here, you can't just use bottom-up attribution. You need to go a step further. You need to think about incrementality. And the good news is, for retargeting, incrementality testing is relatively easy and straightforward. Because you want to understand, incrementality answers the question, what would have happened if the user didn't see the retargeting campaign? So am I spending my money wisely? Okay. Next, I just spoke about seasonality, and we wanted to look at some of the data that we see here. And seasonality is also something that we believe is not going to change. I think maybe there will be AI gods and we'll have new holidays, but Christmas is probably here to stay around. Look at all the beautiful lights out there. So let's look at this. We're dividing these in 3 phases, and each of the phases have different patterns. And within the patterns are different opportunities. But before I go there, I just also want to say that 2025 is complex. It's more complex. It's more competitive. And we spoke earlier about how many people are going to use AI. We see that 65% of the people are planning to use AI to do their holiday shopping. And this is up from 40% last year. So it's accelerating. Okay. So let's look at where we are right now, because this is peak season. And if we look at some of the macro trends, for Black Friday, almost 70% of all purchases were done on mobile, which I think is staggering. And although, like, acquisition costs are up, the value of the users, the conversions, are also up 3x. This is data from last year because we can't predict the future, but we assume it's going to be similar, if not accelerating. And then lastly, a really interesting point is that the users that are acquired in this period tend to be more valuable. And this is by a magnitude of 2 to 3x. And I think that is an important takeaway when considering the whole cost equation. Okay, so I mentioned about patterns that are emerging. Well, this is more data that we have, and I'm going to show you later how you can access this data yourself on our website. Well, I think outside of e-com, who obviously are really engaged in this period, many marketers think that this period is too expensive. But when you look more closely, you see that like towards the end of November, then through Christmas, costs actually come down. But user time spent and user engagement, frequency, and even purchasing behavior remains quite high. This is an opportunity. And when we go back to the obvious seasonal marketeers and investors, I'm going to take an example from our client here in Germany, a bit closer to home, Otto, one of the leading e-commerce players. They do a few things quite well, because they fully understand these trends, right? So they scale up early, and what they're trying to do is to capture the shopping intent. They also make sure, like we spoke about earlier, that the creatives during this period matches the expectation of the users. So they're really careful on what the creative looks like. I mentioned already they're early in the window. And what is interesting is they continue to buy later on in January, because and actually that's one thing. But what is also happening is that what they're seeing is that the value of the users that are acquired continues into January and beyond. So they're really bullish during this period. Okay. Here's some further macro trends for the post-holiday period, which I think, like, all of us know that this is happening faster than we can think, and we call this typically Q5, right? So post Christmas, this is when we say Q5 is starting. And we look at some of the macro trends from the post-holiday. We can see that most users are actually trying to keep shopping. Conversion rates are still high. Or let's say conversions. So people actually shop, a quarter of the people are actually planning to shop after Christmas. And this is in the context of CPA, the cost per action is actually dropping significantly. Okay, looking at another vertical, trading and investing, what you see here is that in this period, CPMs are coming down, revenue stays strong and even grows, which is another massive opportunity, and we've colored in the opportunity area over here. And if you like this data and you want to dive in a bit more into your vertical, feel free to scan. This is the time when you can take your phones out and scan. Before that, you did it without my approval, but it's okay. Okay. And then we're moving to the final. You almost made it with me. Thank you. We're moving to the third theme that is likely not changing. When I think about AI and I think about our business particularly, I do think about our supply, right? And the stability of where we're currently buying from. And I'm sure you have similar concerns as you're thinking about where you're currently acquiring users from. And I think it's important to understand what is happening, what are the shifts that are going on, and how that impacts the stability of the supply that you're acquiring. Well, when it comes to Google and Meta properties, actually only 32% of time is spent there. I think budgets are closer to 60% that are being spent on these properties. So the discrepancy between time spent, user attention, and budget is extreme. I think we can have a whole talk about why this is and how it, to some extent, it could make sense. But what I'm here to talk about is that actually there's a fragmentation happening, and outside of Google and Meta properties, there's a vast app ecosystem with 3 million plus independent apps, where users are spending almost half of their time, right? And so users' behavior is shifting even faster. And I mentioned earlier that I'm thinking about our supply and stability given the shifts and the times that are changing. And as we can see here also, a vast majority of the supply that we have is coming from gaming. And that seems to be very stable and unchanging into the future. But now let's think about how this matters. And earlier this year, we partnered with Singular and looked at more than 2,000 apps and more than $5 billion of ad spend. And we broke them down into two groups, ones that majority bought on Meta and Google properties, and others where 80% of the spend was actually outside of the walled gardens. And what we find is this. We find that on average, I'm just checking the numbers so I don't lie to you, 48% of D30 ROAS is higher for the group that is acquiring users outside, majority outside of the walled gardens. And when we look at consumer apps, this average is even higher, of 116% higher, D30 ROAS. And some even as high as 214%. And I think it makes sense. And the targeting that can be done is not necessarily demographic targeting. It's a different type of targeting that happens. It requires AI, and a bit of a shameless plug. I think we've figured out how to do that. But I shouldn't be talking about myself. Here's some people that know this, that have experienced how they can use Moloco to acquire users on the vast open internet. But I want to leave you with this thought. While journeys are shifting, the relationships endure. And we spoke about how you can ensure that you build strong relationships with your consumers, how you can find them more effectively, when to find them, and how to make sure that you protect your investments and retain them. And you've been a great crowd. Thank you so much.